Welcome to Behind the Screen, brought to you by Aethir. This podcast takes you on a journey through the intricate realms of compute, gaming, Web3, and the cloud. Hosted by the Aethir team, this series is tailored for gamers eager for the next challenge, builders shaping the new internet, and visionaries mapping out the next big thing. Dive into today's episode and uncover what lies behind the screen.
Hi everyone, welcome to the brand new episode of Behind the Screen. We know we've been away for a bit for the past couple of weeks, but we promise these conversations are going to be a more regular part of your social feed starting this week. Also, you probably must have noticed we're taking over from Mark, our CEO, to host this show. Just as a quick intro, I'm Diksha, the head of marketing at Aethir, and I'm so excited to have my co-host and the producer of this podcast, Tanya, with me. So happy to have you, Tanya.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here.
All right, so today we are super excited to have Kyle Okamoto with us. Kyle has been a major player in shaping the tech and IoT world. From his days at Verizon Media to his current role as a CTO of Aethir, we'll dive into his incredible journey today. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Diksha.
All right, so let's dive in. Kyle, you have an incredible journey in tech, IoT, automotives, and we want to take a step back and reflect back on how it was for you and what are some of the key moments or decisions that really steered your career path.
Yeah, I think, reflecting on the last 23, 22, 24 years, something like that, I think the two major things I would say is really run toward the problems, right? Run toward the challenges, raise your hand, volunteer, especially when everybody else has their hand down, right? Even if you don't know the answers or you don't have the capabilities or you don't have the knowledge, you can get those things, right? You can learn and you can grow. But volunteering and running toward problems is absolutely something I would encourage everybody to do. And the second point I would add to that is really embrace the people around you and especially the younger generations, because their problems and their needs and their wants and desires are going to become tomorrow's technological innovations and advances and new businesses. And the next unicorn is going to come out of solving those younger generations' problems. So, in our case, we can ask both of you, hey, what do you guys want to do when it comes to experiencing technology, and what problems do you want to solve? And what challenges do you have today? And your answers are probably pretty good business ideas that we can probably build a pretty strong business around. So embrace the youth, ask questions, and really drive toward challenges.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've been a fan of Shark Tank India lately. I think it's from the original Shark Tank US. It's taken from that, obviously inspired from that. And most businesses that are really exciting and most businesses that understand consumers really well are from these 24, 25-year-old folks, founders who just dropped out of the uni or probably had a great job in the US and just dropped out and went on to raise billions to solve issues like a 10-minute delivery, if you're running late, that's like a real challenge in India, because if you need something, if you go and get it from a grocery store, it's going to take you like probably an hour, given today's traffic in most of these cities. And some of these, I think Zepto is one, if I'm not wrong, but a couple of these companies are really trying to solve that. And it's such a innovative way of looking what kind of problems the younger generation is facing, especially people who are working. So that's a great point to to evolve and to be with the world. We have to really understand what the younger generation wants, what the problems they're facing today. That's a great point.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
for sure. I think we should do a session in Aethir where I talk about the problems that my friends and I are facing.
We're not doing that. That's
Well, I mean, if you think about at Aethir, we have a gaming advisory board, we have an enterprise advisory board where we bring people in and say, hey, what problems are you experiencing? And that drives a lot of our product development and how we position the company, right? And I know Mark, our CEO, loves to talk to actual gamers, right? I mean, the actual people that are using the technology that we're ultimately supporting. What do they care about, and what do they want? And then that helps really inform us, right? I like to call it the voice of the customer. It should be embedded in everything we do. And that's a practice that we follow here at Aethir. So it's great.
Yeah, and also, very it's something very interesting that I noticed. But even for marketing, we're actually talking to the some of these young influencers. Like we're talking to a 20-year-old influencer on Twitch and trying to understand like how can we build on our strategies. And he's going to be like a part of our upcoming gaming influencer alliance, not the gaming alliance, but he's giving us great ideas on how we can build on our ongoing strategy for marketing, not even business. So I think every part in the business needs to understand from the users directly, from the market directly. Yeah, very interesting, very fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. So just kind of taking a little bit of a step back and diving into your journey, Kyle. So you spent a lot of time at Ericsson where you were kind of juggling IoT, automotive, and security, which are again very intense businesses. So can you talk a little bit more about what were the challenges you faced while you were there?
Yeah, sure. So I actually started with Ericsson right before COVID in 2019, running a company called Edge Gravity, which was centered around building out an edge compute cloud. And we built out a lot of distributed edge computing capabilities, kind of behind the firewall, if you want to think about it that way, kind of in the walled gardens of these wireless networks and wired networks, and expose that to application owners. And at that time, edge computing was very much getting going. I would say it's not as mainstream as it is today. Amazon and Google and Microsoft weren't really in the space. They were very centralized still, and so it was a fast growing space. And one of those key use cases that came out was actually cloud gaming at the time, and AI and ML was just starting to kind of be a popular thing. But cloud gaming was very, very much a popular thing. And so was media and entertainment, right? People wanted to experience content, whether that's a game or a movie or a TV show, in a much better and easier way. And so, we built out, and it was a total transformation turnaround business. We had a lot of challenges as a growth startup would. And then COVID hit, and all of a sudden the macro environment changed completely. Everybody went home, right? And everybody went online, and Zoom became a thing, and everybody needed to have fun, and they were all cooped up in lockdowns. And so what did they do? They played games, they streamed movies, they video called their friends and relatives, they ordered pizzas, they did all these different things with technology in a brand new way. And the younger generation, to our previous point, really drove a lot of that, probably because they were the most bored being at home. And so all of a sudden, the infrastructure became so much more important, and the technology became so much more important. So we actually took that opportunity to sell and chop up the business and sell it, which was a very interesting dynamic to do completely virtually, when a lot of those tools that we're all very familiar with now weren't really around. Selling a company and doing due diligence and negotiations and whatnot during COVID lockdowns with no travel was challenging and a first for me. After that, I got asked to take on 3 other companies at Ericsson in IoT, automotive, and security.
Wow.
And they were all very different. One was very, very large and over 100 million connections around the world. Automotive had seen a massive downfall during COVID because people stopped driving, right? They didn't have anywhere to go, and they couldn't go places. So that needed a lot of kind of turnaround. And security was just now kind of coming off the ground as an incubated startup. So they each were in their own different phase and life cycle of the business, which meant they all had their own unique challenges. So running a portfolio was actually a lot of fun because it was such a unique mix. And they each kind of taught me something different on their own accord. And we ended up exiting 2 of those businesses and closed on that transaction in March of this year, which was a lot of fun to ultimately find those 2 of those businesses a really great home with a company called Eris Communications. And so that was really fun to kind of do the whole life cycle, right? To take on these businesses, get them into proper shape, hyperscale their growth, improve their financials, and ultimately sell them on the market. So it was a really fun 4 years of the last 4 years, albeit during COVID.
Yeah, I can't even imagine structuring the exit deals and an entire transaction completely virtually.
Yeah,
That must have been quite difficult for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah. So you did mention that, edge computing is something that's only now kind of becoming more mainstream. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about edge computing in 2023. So from your perspective, how do you think it's, you know, uh, helping gaming and AI? Especially with, AI, we have a lot of new and innovative use cases coming up. And with gaming, it's becoming more immersive, more interactive. So where do you think edge computing comes in there?
Yeah, well, I think the reason why it's becoming, more mainstream and more immersive is because of technological innovations like edge computing, like 5G network rollouts, like Aether from a distributed, cloud infrastructure perspective. Edge computing at the basic form was, 5 years ago was just simply compute, and it wasn't, the type of compute that Aether offers in terms of, graphical processing and heavy, low latency, very sensitive applications like interacting with an AI from a human to AI, perspective. And so now that we have the ability to build out a distributed and decentralized cloud infrastructure, bundle that with much better last mile connectivity from 5G networks, bundle that with much better gaming engines, much better client devices like a simple smartphone. You now are in a situation where you don't have to go buy a $4, $5, $6,000 US dollar computer and constantly keep it upgraded and updated, just simply to play the games that you want. You don't have to download a 25 gigabyte file that needs constant updates all the time. You can just simply log on to any device, whether it's a Chromebook or an Android phone or an iPhone, and start playing your games. Or put on your goggles and do your thing in the metaverse if you want. So I think things like edge computing have allowed us to be much more innovative, and come up with better consumer applications, especially toward the younger generation that wants things wherever they are. They don't want to be stuck at their home or in their basement. They want to interact with their friends and family and be social online and experience lots of different things and try new games and have different business models. They don't want to go to a store and buy a CD. I mean, a lot of them don't even know what that is anymore. So I think that really has changed the landscape. And I think what we're here at Aether to do is allow even more of that experimentation and innovation. We've got a really great set of partners in our ecosystem that have come up with different models, right? Whether it's Web 2 or Web 3, it's about meeting the consumers where they want to be met. And I think that's really, really exciting to use technology to help get consumers to have great experiences.
Yeah. It's actually amazing. I was watching this documentary lately, and it was about how so there's a state called Kashmir in India, and it went on like an intense lockdown during COVID and because of other issues as well, and I couldn't imagine that there's such a huge gaming community, and no one. I mean, it was surprising for me, to see that there's such a huge community, and which includes girls, because it's a bit of a, it's not like a mainstream city in India, and to see even girls were so interested in playing games, and they had like a full-fledged community. They used to like meet at someone's house, and it was really like they wanted to build that as their career, but they had to like hide themselves because it wasn't allowed in the community as such in the society. And when this lockdown happened, they went through like a bunch of issues, ranging from mental health to just feeling very sad because they don't have access to games. And I watched it. I mean, interestingly, I watched it after I joined Aether, and that's when I realized that giving access to games, to the gamers that are really, it really means a lot to them. And we're kind of building an infrastructure on that principle, which is so interesting and really like was a very emotional kind of realization for me that it's such a big thing, and it's not just in like the mainstream kind of place. It's also like in these smaller corners of the world. So yeah, that's really interesting. Also, just want to understand. I've always wondered about this concept of leadership, right? And I was actually reading some of the some of the comments on your LinkedIn from your mentees and your team, and they talked about a lot about how you mentored them and how you allowed freedom, flexibility, and yet a good you gave them good guidance and direction, which is which is very tough, right? And now I'm in this a bit of a leadership role where I manage marketing, and I'm personally also interested in understanding how do you take this concept, because there's no playbook in terms of like how you can lead a team or lead a business, because a lot of decision making is involved here. And how do you make sure everyone's happy, you're making the right decisions? And yeah, really interested to understand this aspect of your career.
Yeah, it's a fun topic that could definitely take up the whole podcast. So maybe to summarize it, I would give you a few points. One is you have to be true to yourself, but you have to flex. And what I mean by that is you have to flex your style. It's well and good to kind of treat everybody how you want to be treated, but it's better to treat people how they want to be treated. And you have to ask, right? Hey, how do you want to interact? How do you want to work together? Do you want a regular one-on-one session all the time on the book so we always have the time, or do you want to just call me when you need me? Do you like to chat on WeChat or Telegram or Teams or WhatsApp, or do you like to take your time and send an email and structure your thoughts? Like, how do you want to interact? And then flex to that person. Like, don't change who you are. You can tell them, hey, this is how I like to react. This is my style. It's fine to have a style, but you should also be adaptive. We work in a very dynamic landscape, right? And now we've got remote work and people are stuck at their houses and we're working across time zones and cultures. You can't always go in with the exact same style, right? I mean, there's only a few Americans on the Aethir team, right? You got to understand different cultures and different dynamics, and what's going on in people's lives in terms of how it impacts their careers. So I would say flex is a super important. The second is, you cannot scale a business with inefficiencies, nor can you scale a business with yourself. So you have to rely on others. And to do that, they need to be autonomous and empowered and accountable, right? So matching and marrying accountability and responsibility. Hey, this is what you need to go do, and I'm going to empower you to go do that, but you're accountable for getting that done, right? It's about results at the end of the day. It's not about how hard you tried or, what kind of effort you put in or how many hours you put in, or it's about what you got done at the end of the day. So giving people the accountability married with the responsibility is how you empower people. Giving them the right tool sets and understanding that we are all people at the end of the day, right? We are not machines yet, right? We are not, AI bots doing work. We're actual people, and we have lives outside of work, and we work to live. We do not live to work. And so understanding that people need the right tools, the right capabilities, the right training, the right education, right? To your point about mentoring, you got to spend a lot of time developing people, because if you develop the people will develop the business. At the end of the day, an organization is only as good as the people within it. The greatest business ideas in the world can fail if they don't have the right people there. So focusing on people and developing people as people, not as human resources or as tools or as employees, but as people, right? And I think that goes a long way, especially in a startup where we're all working crazy hours. We're all wearing 10 hats. We're all doing things that are out of our comfort zone. We're all learning new things at an incredibly fast pace. So really treating people as people and understanding that your leadership style can be your leadership style, but you have to flex it accordingly.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest showcases of this point has been this recent episode at OpenAI. How the team came together and really made so much happen. So that's very interesting. Now this brings me to my next point, which is, so I think one of the most interesting things that stands out for me in your entire career is you really being in Web 2, which is in like very like specific Web 2 industries, right, which are centralized, a bit monopolized, and those kind of spaces, and also being in Web 3, which is completely like a different world. And you spending time in both these spaces, and I'm sure a lot of must have been great learnings, and like how these worlds are converging, because I feel eventually it's not going to be binary, like it's either web 3 or web 2. It has to converge at some point,
Yeah.
maybe web 2.5. What do you feel about this?
Yeah, well, I hope it's Web 2.9. I hope it's a little closer to the 3 side, because we need to democratize the internet and ultimately decentralize things as much as possible to empower people, right? And I think that's one of the great things about Aether is its mission or vision is really to expand things like cloud gaming and AI to places that wouldn't necessarily have that capability, right? Different socioeconomic geographies around the world that don't have a massive data center and a great wireless network and the ability to go buy $5,000-$6,000 computers, right? So I think that's a very important mission and an altruistic one, but still a really great mission. But yes, having worked at very large companies like a Verizon, trying to innovate within companies like that has its own set of challenges, right? I call it intrapreneurship rather than entrepreneurship. But we created a media business within Verizon. There was 12 of us, sitting in a basement with no windows in New Jersey of all places, and said, hey, Verizon, you're really kind of getting, bossed around here by these over the top players. You should really kind of move up the stack and create value and take that value. And so we created a media business that grew and was very successful and very profitable until several acquisitions later that probably weren't the best for Verizon's long-term strategy. So I think, it's really about finding those opportunities, whether you're in a large Web 2 centralized type company, monopoly type company, or whether you're in a startup in the Web 3 space. It's about finding those opportunities and capitalizing on them quickly. Really taking advantage of those opportunities as fast as possible. While I've had large corporate type jobs, I've always tried to kind of diversify with advising and board work in industries and markets that are very, very much outside of the norm, right? So whether it's advertising for a VR company or another crypto-based peer-to-peer company or an AI company like that. So trying to diversify your knowledge base as much as possible will allow you to kind of see the forest through the trees. So I would definitely recommend that to anybody that's been working at one place for a long time. That's not a problem. There's nothing wrong with that. But make sure you see the world out there.
Yeah, for sure. And also diving a little bit deeper into Web3. So you got into Web3 pretty early on, and also dabbled a lot with altcoins and things like that. So do you have any fun stories from any of your investments or your time in crypto?
Yeah, maybe fun's not the right word for it, but lots of learning, I would say. You you mentioned before, explaining NFTs to your mom. My mom is super smart when it comes to that kind of stuff, and she stays up on all of that and asks me lots of questions about it. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, some of it was highly volatile, right? And some of it didn't work out too well, and some of it did, depending on the timing. I remember when I knew kind of the crypto winter was coming was when I started to hear more and more kind of water cooler talk, right? Oh yeah, this thing called Bitcoin is super interesting, and I was like, wow, that person is not really too connected. So if they're starting to talk about it, okay, maybe it's getting a little too mainstream. So you got to kind of time things right. I had a lot of fun supporting the Theta guys. They still have a really great business model and a really great company with Theta Labs, and they've done a lot of really great things to help progress peer to peer when it comes to supporting both AI as well as streaming media and entertainment. And so that was a lot of fun to get involved early on in those days. And a lot of that learning has really helped with Aether because it's very community based and very dependent on both infrastructure and application, and really marrying those two things together in an equitable way, right? In a democratic and fair and open way. But yeah, some of the altcoins and some of the NFTs were definitely wild rides and fun. I would suggest to anybody just, make sure that if you are investing in those things, you do your homework, right? You ask around. There's a lot of really great resources and forums, and people are very open and willing to share information in this community. And I think that's a little bit different than the traditional kind of stock market where a lot of the knowledge is really, really, really centralized. In the Web3 space, people are very, very willing and able and happy to share that information. And so you just have to raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to learn more about this, because it's definitely an option.
Yeah, I mean, just to give it an interesting perspective, I was reading yesterday one of the major NFT marketplaces. I mean, I don't want to name it, but in 2021, their revenue was about like over 100 million, and now it's like a couple of millions. So that's the kind of change that we're looking at here, and it's so important to understand what you're getting into. And like you said, understand what you're getting into, learn about it before you buy something. Or yeah, that's something we always tell our community as well. But yeah, just to give it like a bit of perspective, like how things are changing in Web3, and also for the good, because um we realize what's working and what's not working, what's the right use case, which is actually solving a problem for customers, and that's eventually going to work in the industry. And I'm so excited about this entire cloud space, storage space, because these angles are really working. They are, in some form converging into Web 2 as well, and helping those industries. And it's a great space, for Aether to be building this technology as well.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah. So also, obviously, Kyle, you wear a lot of different hats, whether that's working at Aether or angel investing. So what we wanted to do was also dive a little bit more into your angel investment side of things. So when you're, looking at a startup or looking to invest in a startup, what's really like the it factor for you before you invest?
Yeah. I value the social impact. So if you get asked the question, hey, what do you do for a living, right? You're in an Uber or a taxi or whatever, and somebody says, hey, what do you do for a living? Can you explain it to that person who knows nothing about your industry or your market or the technology that you're talking about? Can you explain it to them in a way that they say, oh wow, that sounds really great, or oh, that's super helpful, or oh, my cousin or my sister or my mailman, they could really use that type of capability or service or product or value or benefit, right? So I like to get involved and invest in companies that can answer that question very, very crisply and succinctly, with an angle of how are they helping improve the world, right? I mean, we've only got one of them, and we've got to leave it better than where we got it. And so I like to invest in companies that understand that it's not just about making money. It's not just about producing a product. It's about, how do we take technology, take products, take services, and take people and actually help improve society in some way, shape, or form, right? It could be an environmental angle, it could be a social angle, it could be a variety of different angles. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to crystallize how you're actually helping do good in the world. Making money is great and it's important, but again, it's just a tool, right? You can't take it with you. And we got to think about our future generations. So that's what I probably value the most.
Yeah, for sure. And another hat that you wear, apart from being an investor and obviously working at Aether, is you obviously have a family. So how do you kind of juggle that? Make sure you're keeping, work-life balance, make sure you're giving enough time to your job, but also to your family. Do you
Yeah,
have any tips for people who are listening?
that's the best hat. That's the most important hat, right? So I was traveling to Montreal a couple of weeks ago, and my Uber driver said, "Hey, what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a dad." Like, that's what I do, right? I'm a dad, right? Like, that's first and foremost. That's what I am, right? And so, that's the priority. And it always has been and always will be. So I would say, understand your priorities. And once you can understand your priorities, then you can figure out balance. Saying no is harder than saying yes, but an essential tool, right? Hey, sorry, I can't take that on. Or, hey, sorry, I don't have the bandwidth for that, right? And I know I said at the top of this podcast, raise your hand and dive toward a challenge, but you got to keep your priorities in order. So a secret tip for listeners out there trying to do the same. I mean, there really are no secret tips for that. It's just understand what your priorities are and allow that to guide you. We work to live. That's it. And the ultimate goal of working is to not work anymore, right? I mean, that's what we all want to do, is we want to work enough to not have to work, or to only work when you want to work, not when you need to work. So use that as your guidance.
Yeah, for sure. I think lastly, just want to, we at our Singapore office, we keep talking about some of these predictions around AI, and they're like huge arguments, like someone is saying that AI is going to take over humans, someone saying like, no, I mean, I personally believe I have a very different perspective on this, and that's specifically based on this video that I've watched by Yan Likhan, who's like one of the top AI guys in the world, and he talks about how AI will be probably more intelligent or as intelligent as humans, but it doesn't mean that they're going to take over humans. And which is why the reason I'm mentioning this is we want to hear it from you. What are some of the predictions that you have in the tech space? Like, if you were to like tell us three things that, okay, I see this happening in the next decade.
Yeah. I would say the concept of everything being internet based is practically already here for some countries. I would say that would definitely happen for all countries. As things like 5G and eventually 6G, really get proliferated to the masses, it gives us a level playing field to not have to have, smart devices, right? And you can start to really dumb down devices, make them smaller, make them easier, make them more accessible, make them more prolific, and really give them a lot more capability, which is exactly what Aethir's trying to do, right? And with the platform that we've built, already supporting hundreds of thousands of gamers around the world, that could have never played a very nice AAA, beautiful experience game before, right? Like an MMORPG, for example, with their friends halfway around the world. Like, it would have never been possible, and now it is. So I think that trend will just simply, get turbocharged, not just with cloud gaming and not just with, 6 billion people every day use either an AI device or an AI powered device in some way, shape, or form, right? 6 billion. It's almost all of them. So I think that will be turbocharged for not just AI and cloud gaming, but for any applications. And that's a sad fact for companies that are selling high-end computers, but it's the reality, right? Moving more and more into a decentralized and distributed cloud infrastructure basis. The next one I would say from a major trend perspective is that all the use cases that we haven't even thought about yet are simply not thought about because of technological constraints. So I think removing those constraints gives us an infinite amount of innovation capabilities, right? With 5G and AI and decentralized cloud infrastructure stuck together. There's really nothing you can't think of. I think we will get more immersive. There's been some fits and starts with the metaverse. And now there's hybrid and AR and VR kind of hybrid models. I think that will just continue, and people will get more comfortable. If you start talking to the younger generations, they're much more adaptable and adoptable to some of those trends. So I think with time, that will definitely continue to dominate, or start to dominate, I should say. And that will create new business models, right? New financial models and new interaction models and new social models. Telehealth and telemedicine on steroids, if you want to think about it that way, are two really great examples. So I think that trend will continue. I don't think that AI will take over the world and we'll see a Terminator or a Matrix, um, or the prequel to to either of those. Um, it's a little scary when boards and CEOs of major AI companies are disagreeing on the fundamentals of their companies to your previous open AI model. But I hope they work things out and get the right checks and balances in place. But I don't expect AI to take over, especially since there's so many of us and there's just so much intelligence and experience and capability in the 7 some odd billion people around the world. So I don't think we need to worry about that anytime soon. But I do think we need to spend a lot more time banding together in a community of people, and that means alliances and thought leadership, and cooperation across companies. At the end of the day, every company is a competitor to every other company in some way, shape, or form. We have to move past that and think about how to cooperate. And I think that's one of the great things about Aethir. And we've got enterprise advisory boards, we've got gaming alliances, we've got AI alliances. Like we're really creating an ecosystem. And it's a multifaceted ecosystem, right? And we value those opinions from, a 20-something-year-old gamer on Twitch that, if you asked a whole bunch of the youth, what do they want to be when they grow up? They say they want to be YouTubers and game streamers, right? They don't say they want to be astronauts anymore. That's long gone, right? They want to be YouTubers and game streamers. So I think really having an ecosystem and community approach is probably the most important technology trend that I hope really catches on going.
Yeah, and when you mentioned use cases, one of the most exciting ones for me is the one passport, one world. Like a bit of a borderless world. I really want that to happen. If any of the founders or researchers are listening to it. But yeah, and yeah, you rightly said, like Tanya says, I want to be an influencer. That's her future. So it's interesting. We need the borderless world to make it happen, and obviously the removing technological constraints. I think this use case specifically is because of constraints. They're not technological, but maybe like socio-political or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's we're coming towards the end of the podcast. But before we wrap up, I just want to end on a very fun note. So Kyle, do you have any fun facts about yourself that would surprise most people?
Fun facts. I make a world-renowned breakfast sandwich. So I live in New York. It's kind of a famous thing here. Like they even acronized it, so it's a BECSPK, bacon, egg, and cheese, salt, pepper, ketchup. Like you go into any good deli and or bagel shop and get one of those. But I've kind of taken that to the next level, and I like to innovate and ideate when it comes to food, basically because I like to eat it. And it's gotten so bad that my wife now absolutely refuses to make breakfast, because it's just like, why bother even trying? So it kind of backfired on me, right? Because I love to eat other people's food, but now when it comes to breakfast and specifically breakfast sandwiches, I'm shackled to the kitchen now and have to be the one to cook that. So, but yeah, it's that's probably one of my favorite things of all time. It's a really good breakfast sandwich.
You're doing that when you're here in Singapore next.
Yeah.
Deal. Sounds like a plan.
All right. So those are all the questions that we had. Thank you so much for coming on. And it was so much fun having you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to the next one.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, we just got it here.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Kyle. I think it turned out really well.
This podcast is brought to you by Aethir. You've made it to the end of another epic episode of Behind the Screen. Smash that subscribe or like button, and don't forget to follow us on YouTube and Twitter for all the latest patch notes and updates. Thanks for listening.